How's it going? It's Nathan Hawken and welcome to the video. So, right now, there's someone that you're not calling. There's an opportunity that you're not pursuing, conversation that you're not having. All because of the story that you've made up about what they think of you. And that story is probably completely wrong. In my coaching work, I have watched leaders who avoid six-figure opportunities. They skip industry events and networking opportunities. They even decline speaking invitations, which I kind of get. Speaking can be pretty difficult if you've never done it before. But not because they're not qualified, but because they convinced themselves that others had already judged them as inadequate, not enough, not smart enough, not the right person to be there. Now, we think we're being realistic about these type of problems and how we're perceived, but this is what I've learned in my own experience, my conversations, working with clients. 90% of the barriers that you think exist are actually assumptions that you've never tested. Now, we think we're being realistic about these limitations, but what I've learned from my conversations, my clients, my own life and experience is that 90% of these barriers that we think exist, they're actually just assumptions that we've never really put to test in real life. You're not protecting yourself from rejection. You're rejecting yourself preemptively. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And I wanted to share how you can audit your assumptions before they audit your opportunities. And why the gap between what you think people think about you and what they actually think is where your breakthrough really lives. So this is the dialogue that most people will say to themselves. This is dialogue I've said to myself when I felt inadequate. This is dialogue that you've probably said to yourself or similar in these type of situations. And this is the type of dialogue that my clients have come to me with when they're struggling in these type of situations. They will go into a networking opportunity or a room of CEOs or whatever it might be, and they will say to themselves, well, they probably think that I'm not experienced enough for this level of conversation, that I probably shouldn't even be here. Or you might say something like, I don't want to waste their time with my questions. It's like, my questions aren't valuable enough to waste these big CEOs with. I don't want to waste their time with my questions. A real kicker is when you say to yourself that, look, they're probably not interested in working with me or working with someone like me. Or I should wait until I'm more, established before reaching out. You can see how this can really just stop you. You're presupposing, you're pre-assuming what the other person is going to be thinking, which is stopping you from taking the action. And this does feel safe, and it feels safer for you because you're avoiding any potential rejection or awkward conversations. It feels safer because it allows you to kind of maintain control over the narrative by not testing it. So you've got this control, like it's not going to work, but have you ever tested it? Well, not really. And this is a really interesting one to think about because it feels safe because it feels humble. It feels respectful rather than being presumptuous. It's that fear of I'm just going to respect the other person's time. I'm just going to be humble in myself and not push anything. I'm not going to be presumptuous and think that they're going to want my service or want to listen to anything I have to say. And that feels safe, but it's really not. But this is actually keeping you stuck because you're creating very elaborate avoidance strategies, which are based on fictional feedback, not real life. It's preventing you from accessing potentially great mentors or partners or opportunities because you're feeling humble, or you don't want to be presumptuous, or you don't want to push, or you don't feel like you're enough in that situation. But most importantly, it's keeping you stuck because you're reinforcing your imposter syndrome through systematic under-engagement. So you're making that imposter syndrome so much stronger that it becomes harder to break in the future. So now it's time for the reality check, because you've got to understand that most successful people are way more accessible than you're assuming right now. It can be much easier to get in front of the people that you want to talk to. And your perception of their judgment is usually harsher than their actual judgment. Who is your own worst critic? You typically are. I know I am for me. And how I perceive a potential judgment is always harsher than what actually happens in the moment or how I'm actually judged. You also have to understand that potentially they're solving problems that you might be able to help with. So instead of being too concerned about how you're going to come across or how you're going to be judged, imagine what it would be like going in if you're thinking more about how you can help them solve their problems. Does that not take the pressure off? But here's a kicker for you as well, and I really hope you hear this one. The cost of being wrong about your assumptions far exceeds the cost of testing them out any day of the week. The cost of being wrong about what you currently assume to be true will far exceed any cost of not testing them. Let me give you an example. For years, I struggled with charging the fee that I want to charge for my coaching because I felt inadequate, because I'd never made that much money before, and I was kind of thrust into an environment where I was kind of forced to charge that without going through those stages of being a $50 an hour to a $100 an hour to a $200 an hour a coach. I was thrust into a world where I was charging 5 figures for coaching for a 3-month package. And the people that are able to pay that type of money were people that were far more successful than me. It took me a long time to come to terms with the fact that I am valuable, that I have skills, that I have tools, that I can actually help those people. And it made no difference about where I had come from. What mattered was that I could help these people, and I can help those people, and I do help those people. The breakthrough comes when you realize that your assumptions about their judgment, about what they're going to think about you, are all based on your insecurities, and there's no actual real opinion there. Those barriers exist in your head, not in the real world. When you understand that and you start to realize that, the breakthrough really comes when the other people and what they think doesn't matter. What matters is what you do, despite what other people think. So this is what's actually happening when those assumption barriers really start to take you over. At the first level, it's like the projection. So this is what you assume that people are thinking about you, about your ability. You're thinking that they'll judge you on your experience level as insufficient. You'll be thinking that they'll see any type of outreach that you do as annoying or presumptuous. They'll question your credibility, your authority, your knowledge, or they'll compare you unfavorably to others. So this kicks in an avoidance strategy. This is how you protect against this imaginary judgment that you've created. And in your avoidance strategy, this is where you start to over-prepare to avoid appearing inexperienced, or you're waiting for the perfect timing, which will never, ever come around. You start crafting these elaborate justifications as to why you deserve their attention. And you start pre-filtering any opportunities through worst case scenarios. And how is that ever going to be effective? So there's the reality gap here. And this is what you need to understand of what's actually true, is that they're focused on their problems. They're not judging your qualifications. There's almost like a golden rule in any type of sales or any type of service you're offering. It's like, can you help this person? That's the only thing that person's really thinking. Not about your credibility, not about who you've worked with in the past. It's like, can you help them? It's like, what's in it for me? This is the problem that this person has. They're only thinking about the problem they have and whether or not you can help them with it. They're more accessible and they're more helpful than you can assume right now, than you do assume right now. They respect directness way more than any elaborate positioning that you might have. And they have problems that you can actually solve. So one thing I learned in my own experience is that the more direct I became, the better the results my clients had. Rather than kind of pussyfooting around the bushes or just kind of lightly touching on the problems, I go straight into it and I call them on it and I say, look, this is what's happening right now. This is what I do for you. Or it gets way more respect than me trying to talk myself up into something that I'm not, just to kind of suit their model of the world. So all of this is well and good. So all of that is well and good. You understand the problem. This is the challenge. This is what you're probably struggling with right now. How do we get past that? How do we move beyond that? How do we actually have a breakthrough that really works? Well, here's a bit of a framework that you can go through, which will help you if you feel like you're struggling in this type of negative thinking, this poor self-talk, that you're too busy about what other people are thinking about you and being judged. So it's step one, it's the assumption identification. And this is where you're going to list the conversations, the opportunities that you're currently avoiding. So take time and actually sit down and think about, what have I been avoiding? What conversations have I been avoiding? What opportunities are right in front of me but I'm avoiding right now because I'm too worried about what other people think? Then write down exactly what you assume those people are thinking about you. And don't hold back either. Be as strict and harsh as possible. What do you really think people are thinking about you? Next, identify the evidence that you have of these assumptions. And here's a spoiler. There usually isn't any. But have a think about it. What evidence do you have for these assumptions? Then rate them. Rate each assumptions on likelihood versus impact. So what's the likelihood that this is true? And what's the impact that it really is? So then we move to step 2. And step 2 is your reality testing protocol. And this is where you design any low-risk ways to test out those assumptions. Start conversations to gather actual data rather than that imaginary feedback that you're creating. Ask direct questions about their priorities and challenge, like without any type of judgment or fearing of being judged. Ask direct questions and then pay attention to their actual responses, not your interpretation of the responses. What you'll probably find here, you'll most likely find here, is that when you're asking questions, when you're understanding the person's priorities and their challenges, you will notice they're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. And they respect the fact that people actually show genuine interest in the other person's problems, the other person's feedback, the other person's challenges. Once you've done that, let's move to step 3, which is your assumption audit results. So you compare what you assumed they'd think versus what was actually said in the conversation. Then identify any patterns that you noticed in your projection tendencies. Like what were you projecting on first? And notice what patterns were there in your own thinking and how you were projecting that. Then we think about the future there, and you just adjust your future approaches that you're going to have and future conversations that you have based on the real world data that you've just collected, rather than the imagined barriers that you've had up until this point. So we're working with that real world feedback now, not the imaginary feedback. And then start to build confidence from these actual interactions, not the theoretical scenarios that we create in our heads which stop us doing these things. So your confidence doesn't come from what you thought was going to happen or you think will happen. It's coming from actual real world interactions that you've now had. To assist you with this process, here's 3 or 4 questions which I think will really help, and they're designed in a way to get you thinking about how you think other people think about you. That's a lot of things in one sentence. So question 1 is, what am I assuming that these people are thinking about me? Question 2 is, what evidence do I have that this assumption is actually accurate? Question 3 is, what's the cost of being wrong about this assumption? And question 4 is, what would I do if I found out that this assumption was completely false? These are powerful questions. They might be difficult to think about, but I encourage you to take time now and sit down and really think about it and really meditate on the answers and see what comes up. Now, there's a couple of warning signs which might indicate that you're living in the land of assumption, where you might be using phrases like, well, they probably think X, Y, and Z. Yeah, they probably do think, without any actual data. Now, if you are avoiding these type of conversations, these type of environments, networking opportunities, and you realize that you are missing out on opportunities because of this, then this is the exact type of work that I do with my clients, as well as other things. So if you'd like to have a conversation, I encourage you to reach out, send me a message, leave a comment below, and we can just have an initial conversation and find out exactly what's going on. So just as a final thought before I finish off this video, just remember that your assumptions about the judgment that people may or may not have about you are usually more limiting than their actual judgments and what they actually think. The question isn't whether they'll think you're good enough. It's whether you'll give them a chance to find out. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I hope it has served you in some way. If it has served you, then I'll just ask, please like the video, share it around, hit the notifications, and subscribe to the channel. It'll really help me out. It'll help me reach more people and serve more people at a different level. Thanks again, and I'll see you at the next one.